Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game So taking a video today that you guys have been asking me to make. That is because we're going to be directly comparing the Twilight Princess Dusk PC port against something like the Wii U version of the game. And even if Twilight Princess got its life started as a GameCube title that also went over to the Wii, Nintendo remade it for the Wii U, giving us an HD version of the game. And honestly, it was a very fun release, but we're going to be directly comparing Dusk versus the Twilight Princess on Wii U version of the game to talk about the differences and go over why the Dusk PC port definitely is right now, in my opinion, the best de facto way to play this game. And that's not to say that the Wii U version of the game is bad in any way, shape, or form. It is spectacular, and it was my favorite way to play Twilight Princess up until the point that we got PC ports based upon the Twilight Princess decomp. And as we watch the intro here on Dusk, the number one night and day difference, pun very much intended, is going to be down to the bloom in color. You'll see when we move over to the actual Wii U version of the game, you get a completely different vibe, and that bloom absolutely dialed way too high up in my opinion. And that's something that no one has really loved about Twilight Princess in the past, at least from what I see in comments. The bloom is very dramatic and it almost makes the game feel a little bit too overexposed and hot in spots, and also makes it feel a little bit too soft as well. The nice thing is on the Twilight Princess Dusk PC port, if you do like that look, you can get the bloom back to its original native state, so you basically get the best of both worlds depending on what it is you want to do with your overall image quality. And that is definitely something I always advocate for and always appreciate when developers give you the option to kind of articulate the experience you want out of a game. And I'm not saying that the Wii U version of Twilight Princess looks bad in any way, shape, or form. It is just a little bit different of a vibe. It has a little bit different color palette as well. Some of the colorways are a little bit warmer, and some of the actual highlights get a little bit closer to quote-unquote overexposed. Now that was by the developers at Nintendo, so it's not like it is quote-unquote wrong or in any way, shape, or form not doing the correct thing. It is just two different ways to have an image present in front of you. Now moving back over to Dusk here, you will see that this is definitely going to run at a higher frame rate, but that is via interpolation. It isn't actually changing the internal frame rate right now for the game to render frames in and of itself. And that is because, and I know this can confuse some people, the Twilight Princess logic is tied to its frame rate. So if you actually adjust the internal frame rate too much, you end up with a game that's actually running basically what looks like in fast forward or some sort of comedy sketch sort of scenario. Not every single game does this. Some games ran at uncapped frame rates and will continue to run the game speed at whatever would be correct no matter how many frames you're drawing, but Twilight Princess is a title that does have that logic tied to the frame rate. That's something we basically see almost across the board on some of the earlier Legend of Zelda games. With this rainbow in the background here, everything else again, I think it looks absolutely spectacular, and this to me personally is a better look than the Wii U version. And I know sometimes I drag Nintendo on the channel for all of their lawsuits and other ridiculous things they do, but when it comes to actual art, the color rendition you see on screen and the overall visual fidelity, as a filmmaker, if Nintendo did a better job than the Dusk developers, I would happily tell you that, because I have no interest in who wins this contest, just to talk about my overall impressions. Now moving back over to the same sequence on the Wii U version of the game, you'll see here on Link's face that bloom gets a little bit too dramatic, and on his tunic in the back in the white, especially on my LG C4 OLED, it just ends up being slightly too hot in my opinion, and it ends up actually pulling your eye towards things that the developers were not intending you to focus on. Because when you have a character's face like Link on the screen, if your number one eye kind of draw is going to be to the back of a white patch of fabric, then that is something that can be overall distracting. It's the same thing here when you kind of see the sun ever so slightly blown out on the highlights, and that's something I actually like to have come down. But the fun thing is, again, in the Twilight Princess Dusk PC port, you can adjust this around to get the look you want, because as far as the stability, as far as your control options, quality of life improvements, and everything else, Twilight Princess Dusk is going to absolutely blow the Wii U version of the game out of the water when it comes to your ability to kind of make the experience that you would like to make. And if you can't tell already, I am emulating this just for ease of use, but it works perfectly on SEMU, so it's one of those things. It doesn't really affect the overall testing strategy here. Let's go into a soundtrack sample. First, we're going to do Dusk, and then we're going to move into the Wii U version of the game, so go ahead and listen and hear if you see anything different. Now, I always like to caveat every single statement with the fact that I am a filmmaker. I have a master's degree in direction and cinematography. I do not touch any audio whatsoever. That's a completely different department on a film set. But I would say, at least according to my ear, the soundtrack sample and the overall sound effects from the Twilight Princess Dusk version of Twilight Princess versus the Wii U version sound absolutely one-to-one identical to me. And honestly, it's using the exact same sound samples, so it's one of those things you'd have to basically have some errors or issues in the sound reproduction on Dust to not have it sound as good as the Wii U version of the game. So in the audio department, everything seems to be absolutely bone stock one-to-one. Now, herding these goats here in the beginning of the game, first in Dusk and then moving over to Twilight Princess again, you're going to see a fundamentally different version of the game, and I would say this open field here just does not look anywhere near as good on Wii U, nor does it run at a higher frame rate. Now again, I can't stress enough that Dusk isn't actually running the game at a higher frame rate. It is using that interpolation to basically create frames, but it is a more fluid experience, and we kept the basic interpolation down to a minimum here as well, so it doesn't really absolutely contrast too hard with the Wii U version of the game, because you can run this thing at whatever your panel refresh rate is. I've seen people in the comments go all the way up to 240 Hertz. Now, of course, that is a nice derivative of something like 30, basically being 8 times the frames, but it basically will adhere to any sort of actual frame rate your panel has. But now we have to talk about the 100% subjective thing. This is the Wii U version of the game. Go ahead and look at the foliage here, and in just a moment right now we're going to move over to the actual GameCube version, in this instance Twilight Princess Dusk running on PC. There are texture placement differences between the Wii U version of the game and the GameCube version of the game, which clearly something like Twilight Princess Dusk is based on. And you also have the third option, which is using the Noriko 4K texture pack, which I did a video on earlier this week, kind of giving you 3 different independent options as to which one you might decide looks better. Now this is one that I cannot answer for you, but as we go back to the Wii U version of the game, it has a slightly different vibe, and that is something that you'll have to decide for yourself which one actually looks better. But you leave me a comment down below and you tell me, between the textures of the GameCube version and the Wii U version as stock things, which one do you prefer? I would say ever so slightly I like the overall look and vibe of the GameCube original again, but I totally understand why Nintendo changed the textures around when they moved it up to HD, because they needed HD textures, and I wish they'd kind of just kept everything stock, but they did go in and make some artistic changes to the version of the game. So honestly, comparing something like Dust to the Wii U version in some spots can be quite difficult because it's going to have a slightly different look. But here's a fun little test. I'm not going to tell you what this actual capture is from right now. We're going to go into our next soundtrack sample. The first is going to be from one version, and the second is going to be from the second version, and they're going to be basically the exact same clip with a slightly different look. So go ahead and listen and see if you can tell the difference between the two. So you tell me down below, was the first clip from the Twilight Princess Dusk PC port, or was it from the Wii U version of the game? And was the second clip from the Twilight Princess Dusk PC version or the Wii U version of the game? Same way to say the exact same thing twice, but I'm curious to see if you guys can tell the difference, because I basically try to keep that as bone stock as I possibly could. But I will tell you right now, we are on Dusk right now, and especially in areas like this where the highlighting is kind of basically getting close to being washed out, Dusk, with its lack of intense bloom, definitely is the de facto better looking version of the game for me to play. And honestly, if we're talking about all of the different bonus features, all of the quality of life improvements, and everything else in Twilight Princess Dusk, it absolutely is head and shoulders standing above Nintendo's own effort. And don't get me wrong, Twilight Princess HD on the Wii U was an excellent release, and I have it on my shelf along with my GameCube version of Twilight Princess. Never did actually collect the Wii version, because why would I need that? but Twilight Princess Dusk is 100% the way that if I want to play Twilight Princess again, I am going to play it until Courage Reborn comes out, and I guess we can decide which one you'd want to play from there, because the reality situation is we're going to be rerunning these videos again, showing you comparisons between Dusk, Twilight Princess, Courage Reborn, as well as the Wii U version of the game, in basically a heads up display of exactly what's going on here. And that definitely is going to be a very fun time because more of Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess is always going to be enjoyable for everyone. And if you have been playing Dusk, leave me your thoughts down below. Tell me what you love about it and maybe one of the things you'd love to see improved. Because as of right now, you still don't really have a constraining option to go to 16:9 if you're on ultra-wide panels. That's the one thing I'd love to see them improve. But I will say there's one item between Twilight Princess Dusk as well as the Wii U version of the game that is 100% identical, and it's still the best part about Twilight Princess even all of these years later. That is the fact both versions of the game are going to let you pick up the puppy, and that is definitely going to be a 69 out of 10 in my book. But short of that, we're done. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below, but I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.